Can you please list the ways in which the number 5 relates to all manifestations of life?
Mambo number 5.
Okay, so the first 3 episodes of Raised by Wolves are now out on HBO Max, and throughout this video we're going to be breaking down everything. I just want to get into it as there's a lot to talk about, but obviously there will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check them out yet, then I highly recommend that you check out now. Make sure you subscribe to the channel for breakdowns on it every week, and please drop a thumbs up if you enjoy the video. With that out of the way, welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition. Now let's get into Raised by Wolves. Okay, so firstly, before talking about the episodes themselves, we have to talk about the title of the show and how it plays into them. The phrase Raised by Wolves is an idiom that often refers to someone who's socially inept or acting in a way that doesn't seem normal. However, it also refers to the story of Romulus and Remus, 2 brothers that were, according to the legend, raised by wolves. The pair later founded Rome and the Roman Empire, and according to the myth, Romulus killed his brother. This could hint towards the direction that the show's going, but it also provides the subtext to what's happening in it. Predominantly, the series is going to centre around 2 androids named Mother and Father, who fled the Earth with human embryos. On the planet Kepler-22b, the pair are attempting to raise the last surviving one of these named Campion amongst some Earthborn children. This is how the show itself ties into the title, as it makes us question whether it's possible for a synthetic person to raise a human to be human. Sure, we could potentially program something to carry this out, however, we know that it's far more complex than just black and white, and there are many facets to our species, both positive and negative. We see the conflict this causes, and it also makes us study the fault in ourselves which caused the Earth to become inhospitable. Now, on top of the Romulus and Remus metaphors, there is of course the Adam and Eve one, which too is deeply rooted in mother and father. They're pretty much arriving on a planet after being cast out of what used to be a paradise, and they have to make their way through a cold and unforgiving world. Both were created in the image of man, similar to how Adam and Eve were created in the image of God, and I love watching them arrive on the planet and walk past a rotten tree, which of course was meant to be a metaphor for the Tree of Knowledge. I say of course, that's just how I interpret it. Now, Kepler is a barren wasteland, looking like one of the bad planets in Interstellar, but its name too holds a lot of meaning. In science, the name Kepler comes from the German astronomer and mathematician who's considered by many as the founder of celestial mechanics. Kepler was the first person to accurately describe the elliptical orbits of the Earth and planets around the Sun, and he demonstrated that the ones that are closest also move the fastest. Kepler-22b is actually a real planet, and it's one that NASA have actually studied because it's very similar to our own Earth. It's located about 587 light years from Earth, and it has 290 days in its orbital period. Seems like a lovely place to go, and I'll definitely be rating it on TripAdvisor. Now, a Campion is a flower, and the character should be seen as someone that's attempting to blossom amongst the wasteland and all the issues that come with being on the planet. Campion is also named after the android's creator, and this could tease that it was the character that tried to send this ark out into space to flee the dying planet, and who knows, we may get more of his backstory as the season goes on. The show opens with the voice of a child stating that they were the first, and that they were seen as pioneers. Pioneers are often described as discovering things, and this has both negative and positive connotations depending on its usage. We see a nuke explode before Mother and Father journey in their ship to Kepler-22b, and after a bumpy landing, they make the planet their home. Our first time jump is 9 months, and this of course plays on the birth cycle of a woman. Birth cycle of a woman. I can't believe I worded a sentence like that. I'm starting to talk like they are now. Anyway, the character Mother really becomes attached to the children, as they pretty much come from the organic fluid within her body that's used to grow them. In many ways, she carried them, and they are her children. Now, I thought this was an absolutely brilliant motif to bring across, and it's almost cyclical how man created machine, and the machine created man. Mother is clearly torn up when one of the children early on seems to die. However, they come to life, and this quote-unquote runt of the litter ends up as the last surviving member of the group after the others fall either to disease or accidental death. Now, early on, Mother tries to enforce the idea of atheism into the children, and it seems to be putting across the notion that it's as damaging as enforcing strict religion is. Growing up, I was brought up to be quite religious, and then I became an atheist for a bit before settling on being agnostic. I know that's not really making my mind up, But I think because science can't provide all the answers, we have to keep an open mind about things, and there are certain elements of life that just can't be explained purely by numbers. There's a famous saying that facts don't care about your feelings, but juxtaposing this, it's clear that Campion's feelings don't care about the facts, and that he wishes to be spiritual even though Mother forbids this. Feelings don't care about your facts. I'm getting that on a t-shirt. Anyway, I think that this show is saying that you have to have an open mind to discover things on your own, instead of having ideas forced upon you either way, as that is very wrong. This can lead to brainwashing, and it's better to have a society that's open to discourse rather than one that shuts down all opinions in favour of one. The synthetics lie about the dangers of the planet in order to try and keep the children safe, and similar to humanity, which they criticise, they use fear as a way to control the population. Mother's powers even come from her voice, and Ridley Scott is very much lacing this with symbolism for how she lords over her people. Mother definitely doesn't come across as that good of a person when she's saying that all religion is bad, and that you have to say how 5 relates to all manifestations of life. This way of thinking in binary terms even begins to break Mother herself, and we can clearly see that she's racked by the deaths of her children, even though it should be seen as something scientific instead of something that she feels. Now, there is a milk-like substance that drips from her nose, and this did give me hope that the show could be linked in some ways to my favourite Ridley Scott franchise, Alien. Now, Fox own that, and they are owned by Disney, whereas Warner Brothers are the ones behind the series. I think that this was left in as an Easter egg so that fans can draw their own conclusions, and both the androids in the show do seem quite similar to the way that the synthetics and David work in that franchise. We will of course never get it confirmed, but I appreciate that Scott carried across this aesthetic. Now, Father realises that there's no way to increase the human population if Campion is the only one left, and thus he attempts to signal a group known as the Mithraic. Angered by this, Mother destroys him in a milk-filled rage, and thus it's just her and Campion left on the planet. Campion himself goes to the ship and also sends out a broadcast which calls them to the planet, and Mother pretends to be human due to AI being viewed as objects rather than things that should have any input. Juxtaposing this, the atheists clearly trust machine learning as they allowed Mother and Father to look after their children, whereas the Mithraic use androids to do their dirty work. The Mithraic are heavily religious, and though it is hinted that they were the cause of the war, this opinion is likely skewed for Mother, as she was of course created by the atheists. We see at the start of episode 2 that Mother and the synthetic family that she belonged to were some of the most devastating weapons in the war. These necromancers were purely built to wipe out human life, and the name derives from a word that describes someone who can communicate with the dead. If the atheists were using these weapons, then it's clear that they weren't as righteous as we're led to believe. They also drafted kids into their war, and who knows, they may have brought on the conflict. We learn very little about the Mithraic, but I have a theory that, due to the way that they are turned, with all the planet's destabilization and death that likely came with it, that they turned to religion. This is of course hinted by Campion himself, who does start to turn to religion after the death of his siblings. In the morning they attempt to take Campion to their ship, which Mother protests, and after a robot fight, this descends into her wiping them all out except for Marcus. Now, the first episode had been quite slow in my opinion up until this point, but when she goes full Dr. Manhattan, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Her design is very similar to the 1927 film Metropolis, which was groundbreaking in cinema. Just as in that was the first real machine we ever saw on screen, the same idea is brought across to Mother, with her being a machine for this new world. In that film, someone from a futuristic utopia travels to the slums, which are a poverty-stricken wasteland. I feel like that's been reversed here, with Mother travelling from a society that's not that well developed to one that is. She journeys to the Mithraic ship, impersonating Marcus, and then kills almost all on board with her sonic blasts. There's some irony to this, as we find that the Marcus we see is actually someone impersonating the real one, and there's a lot going on here in terms of what the truth is. She crashes the ship, and then takes 5 of the children, starting a new family on Earth. We also see that Mother has to remove her eyes at this point, and the strobe-like light could be the key to stopping her down the line. There's a lot of things to do with eyes throughout the first 3 entries, and it does seem almost like a weakness on both sides. I think that the Mithraic believe that if they die with their eyes open, they can't rest or may not go to the afterlife, but obviously let me know your thoughts below. We discover that they are what allowed Mother to weaponize, and that she removes them in order to get the children to trust her. They should be called Weapon Eyes. Eh? You having that? Been a bit of a crap video, this one, hasn't it? Now, it seems like she wants to do the right thing, but that of course goes up in the air as we get further into the 3 episodes. In the second entry, we see the war firsthand, and also Marcus's transformation with his girlfriend Mary. We discover that he's really called Caleb, and both these names of course tie into the Bible, further hammering home the religious aspects of the show. They kill their true counterparts, and we see that Marcus is willing to do anything that he can to survive, even taking their child as they board an ark headed to the Kepler. They even left the dogs behind, and you better hope that John Wick isn't on this, because I'm not having that. Now this was a 10-year journey for them, and whilst in stasis their minds continued inside a simulation so that they could grow and develop. So the kids that we see are actually older mentally than their bodies, which does mean that they're far more developed than Campion is. Back on Kepler, Mother reactivates Father, who isn't too happy about getting shut down. She gifts him her eyes in order to gain his trust, and this is mirrored by the Mithraic children who give Campion a mouse in order to try and get him on their side. The leader of them, Hunter, tells him that Mother likely poisoned Campion's siblings, and I was actually in the middle of writing that I thought this would come up down the line when it started to once more. It's revealed that the deaths were actually caused by radiation inside Carbos, which Mother and Father didn't detect. This caused the Gen 1s to die, and they did develop some resistance that the new children simply don't have. To make matters worse, we learn that they've gone through a lot, and that one of the children, Tempest, actually views Mother as a saviour because she saved her from being abused further by a crew member that impregnated her. I'm kind of dancing around this a bit just because of monetization on YouTube, but it really is a dark point in the show that's a difficult watch, and it reminds us of a lot of similar things in the church that were covered up by the group to not bring scandal to it. She's attacked by a group of animals, and this sets Father out on a quest to attempt to secure one of them for study. Across world, Marcus is saved by some of the Mithraic forces that survived the crash, and we journey into the third entry with Mother telling the story of the 3 little pigs. It's a tale that we tell children, but in it is the idea that one must make their house strong and protected in order to remain secure. Mother is clearly showing that when the wolf's at the door, one must be ready, and I do think that it's hinting out why she's kept her eyes just in case the Mithraic return. This paranoia is warranted too, as we see across the planet, Marcus pleads with the Mithraic to storm the camp in order to rescue the children. I love how they became attached to their surrogate child, much in the same way that Mother did hers, and it's clear that both sides just wish to allow the human race to continue, no matter the cost of their own life. Both believe that children are our future, and if you teach them well, you can let them lead the way. Now, I actually have a theory that the disease which the kids fall victim to will also fall upon the adults, and it is possible that it will reappear later in the season, perhaps even weaponized, similar to how smallpox was used on Native Americans. There's also mention of the Pentagonal Prophecy, which tells of an orphan boy named in an empty land who will lead the humans to a place in which they can build a city of peace. Though this does initially seem like it's going to be Campion, I think it could actually be their child Paul, who is of course an orphan himself. Marcus's identity is also clearly going to get unearthed, and the more and more people ask him personal questions, the more we start to realise it's not going to be long before someone asks him something that he can't bluff his way through. As they begin to go through the area, Mother descends upon it, destroying one of the group's androids and taking their eyes. Now, it is possible that the aliens come from the hole which the ship fell into, and the explosion of it caused them to awaken once more. Campion is sure that Mother is tricking them, and this makes him flee with the rest of the children. Mother takes antibiotics from the craft, and Father brings these to the children. At the camp, he proves Mother didn't poison them, and this showcases how paranoia can often get in the way of the truth. Campion is almost killed by a monster on the planet, but he's saved by Father, who seems pretty gutted that he betrayed him. Mother goes looking for Paul, who departed the camp, and he becomes lost in the wilderness, where he seemingly finds another child. Now, I do believe that this is Tally, for the fact that he finds a doll before stumbling across the hole. Tally's body was never found in the opening episode, and she did make her dolls similar to the ones that we see. It is possible that these holes lead to tunnels which pop up around the planet, and that Tally emerged out of the one that Paul fell into. As she was away from the camp with no real idea of what direction it was, she likely remained in this area, and who knows, the monsters may even be linked to her. She also would not suffer from the radiation poisoning that the other children did, due to not being exposed to it, and with the laugh that the mysterious figure gives off, sounding very similar, it does seem like the two are indeed one and the same. Now as for the show itself, I don't know if it's because I watched the first 3 episodes back to back, but I did find it a bit slow. I'm still really engaged in it though, and there is a lot here that I want to see. I'd obviously love to hear your thoughts on it and your theories, so make sure you comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this video, then please drop a thumbs up and make sure you check out our breakdown of Lovecraft Country, which is going to be linked at the end. We're also giving away a free copy of the Christopher Nolan collection to one random subscriber, and all you have to do to be in with a chance of winning is like the video, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below. The winner is going to be chosen at random on the 30th of September, so make sure you get involved. If you want to support the channel and get to see content early, then please consider clicking the join button below. You can also come chat to us on a Discord server linked in the description, or Heavy Spoilers on Twitter. Thanks for making it until the end of the video. You've been the best. I've been Definition, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.